any game could be seen as off-kilter if described in the right way. Despite that, I think I have here a list of truly quirky games. There are definitely some well-known quirky games for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, Wario Land 3 being a quintessential example.
Wario Land 3.
But I'm going to focus a majority of my attention on lesser-known and indie titles. I'm not endorsing every one of these games as great, but some are definitely hidden gems. This isn't going to be a pure review of these games. I just want to take a look at some Game Boy oddities. I would say that every game on this list has drawbacks, but they're all definitely quirky and interesting games.
Adulting.
In this very short game, you struggle through the experience of being an adult, doing things like resetting your router, buying coffee filters, and filing your taxes. It's all done with a goofy, cartoony art style that is quite endearing. And as I've always wanted, there's even a button to swear. It's censored swearing, but it gets the job done. The point of this game is to get through the frustrating realities of a day in the life of a youthful adult. Trickle Greenweed. Trickle Greenweed, attorney at law. So you see, this is a story about a mermaid who's a newly certified lawyer. She opens up a small law office in Atlantis and takes a nap. She wakes up to find an elf, or rather a mer-elf, that is from the North Pole. He needs help with a case, and to her surprise, the case is murder. But it's not really murder. Well, you see, Santa is accused of this murder. But he's not really Santa, he's Sea-Anta, as in the ocean. And he didn't murder a person because elf law is very emotional. He's actually accused of murdering Christmas by bombing the facility where the toys for Christmas are kept. Basically, it's the classic tale of Santa being accused of metaphorical murder. The only difference than usual is everyone is mermaid people. So that's the setup for this suitable for all ages dialogue-based adventure. There are some detective portions of the game, and there's some trial portions of the game, with Sea-Anta's future being on the line. One of the biggest drawbacks here is the characters are quite verbose, and take a long time to get to the point. But there's a lot of quirky humor along the way. The latter half of the game is basically just the trial, and I found that part the most entertaining. The game tackles themes like automation, ego, and the spirit of Christmas, which, let's be completely honest, has moved towards consumerism. I had an issue with the version of the game I was playing off itch.io. It soft-locked when you had to first present some evidence at the trial. A couple of the dialogue options were bugged and led to game-ending dead ends, but I was able to move on by showing the relevant evidence after this specific bit of dialogue that I'm showing here. The rest of the game didn't cause me any issues. Apparently there's an expanded and improved version of the game for the Playdate. That's the system with the little crank. But I can't say much about that since I don't have a Playdate system. Overall, this isn't a masterpiece, but it's the definition of quirky. Batty Zabella. The first objective in this game is to make some food for your son. He is clearly a struggling hybrid of a bat and a human that lives in a clouded state of consciousness. But like a good mother, you need to help him out. Your bat husband is missing, and the house is infested with ghosts. After a creepy encounter with a ghost, you soon find yourself in a cavern underground where you must escape and get to the bottom of things. There are some sexually suggestive themes in this one. There's always a moment for a dirty double meaning to things or a completely unnecessary angle on the graphics of the main character. Batty Zabella is a sarcastic lead who's willing to crack a joke and in some instances talk back to the player. This is a well-crafted horror comedy point-and-click adventure that requires some logic skills to get through the various environmental puzzles. Monkey Puncher. Have you dreamed of being a monkey puncher trainer? Yes, of course you have. This game gives you the chance to step into the shoes of a monkey puncher trainer. Train monkeys to fight other monkeys. Wow, this seems really morally questionable. But it's just a game. A game that was released in the year 2000. It's a bit of a tedious game though, almost like a virtual pet. You don't actually control the monkey you trained in any given fight. It's automated except for the strategy you give the monkey. Most of the game is somewhat interactive and repetitive training montages and management of your monkey's day and resources. If you have patience for it, then it could be an odd and chill game to return to over and over. But I have to say I wasn't drawn into this one. Also, you can have your monkey date other monkeys and end up with a new baby monkey to train. Taito clearly made a very niche title here. Pokemon Blue Kaizo. I'll admit I have a special affection for the original Pokemon games. Generation 1. I think all Pokemon games and media after that was just trying to recapture the magic of these amazing games. And if you were to measure it purely by economic success, I'd say they've been successful. But just like the first Super Mario Bros. Game, it's impossible to replicate the simple brilliance of the game. And a lot of the 2D follow-ups just add complexity, decorations, flourishes, and tweaks. Pokemon Blue Kaizo is both a masterpiece of a ROM hack of the original Pokemon Blue version and a complete trolling of the player. It's brilliant, but it has those vibes of a creator who wants to both challenge and frustrate you. It has long mazes of Pokemon trainers. They're always a bit higher level than it's convenient, unless you grind experience hard. The gym battles can be outright unfair. If you were thinking that Pokemon games are too easy and they need to make harder ones, the creator of this hack, sinister hooded figure, basically says, "You sure you want it harder?" and then doesn't pull their punches. That said, it's not impossible even for a regular old Pokemon gamer to play this game, especially if you save your progress with save states and do a bit of experience grinding. And sometimes harder games can feel more rewarding, even though there's a lot of random luck involved in Pokemon, and not more pure skill required for games like Dark Souls and Elden Ring. Also, you can collect all 151 of the original Pokemon in this game. Sinister Hooded Figure made an Emerald Kaizo ROM hack for the Game Boy Advance as well, but I haven't played it. This isn't the only quirky Pokemon game. One other one I'll mention as a bonus is Pokemon Cramorant Edition, which is a hack of Pokemon Yellow, where instead of getting a Pikachu from Professor Oak, you get a Cramorant with its confused, clueless stare. In fact, it happens in a pretty ridiculous scene where Cramorant bites Pikachu and scares it away. It's a super silly idea for a hack. Skate or Die. N Rad. This 1990 Konami skate game is a pretty standard fare for the first level. Then it starts to get a little odd with a Clown Dreamland themed level. Then back to something more normal. Until this odd boss. There's a lot of quirky notes of character in this one, almost approaching a bit of a horror vibe at times. That may be an exaggeration, but it is odd. The game itself almost feels like a hidden gem, because it's very fun to play and has some cool graphics for the Game Boy. But it's got a major issue. It gets brutally hard. I'm no pro gamer, but I'm certain beating this game is only for someone with major hardcore gaming skills. Otherwise, its little idiosyncrasies and unfair moments soon get frustrating. The game can move fast, and if you don't know what's coming, you can die easily. And even if you know what's coming, you can die easily. The Ungrateful Son. This is a super short one. It's a Game Boy game from 1815. I mean, the game itself, I believe, is from 2022. But it's a Brothers Grimm tale made into a visual novel. It's about a man being cursed to have a frog on his face for the rest of his life, because he was a terrible son. The pixel artwork is detailed and gorgeous, and the story is completely absurd. The moral here is to respect your elders. Sherlock, A Study in Scarlet. I'm a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes. I've read all the books and short stories. I adore a good adaptation of Sherlock Holmes, my favorite by far being the TV series starring Jeremy Brett. So I had to check out a Game Boy adaptation of the original Sherlock story. It's pretty silly. It's a meta and self-aware version of A Study in Scarlet that refers to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's writing style, among other things, during the game by the characters in the game. The pace is kinda silly and fast, and as with pretty much all adaptations of Sherlock stories, there is a fatal flaw of not truly having the perspective of Watson on all things. It's in Watson's voice that we get the intricate descriptions and surprising revelations. Though this game is meant to be a silly parody of Sherlock Holmes made for fans, not a serious adaptation. I mean, I could imagine many of the lines of this game ending with the word bro and it totally fitting in. A lot of the story was essentially automatic and of course linear, but it moved along at a pace that was good for this kind of game, and it was lovingly put together. The part of the original story that follows the events surrounding Mormons in America is much abbreviated, and not actually shown beyond a short recounting. Yes, if you're not aware, a lot of the original Sherlock Holmes story was about Mormons in America. Abbreviating this part was probably a good choice due to the style, pace, and scope of this game. Otherwise it would have dragged. I also liked how it said, "Good save!" whenever you save the game at the automatic save points. There were some funny parts, like a big discussion over whether killing a dog in the story would alienate the modern audience. Overall, I enjoyed the adventure and I appreciate the dedication involved in making it. It's a charming little game. And of course, credit goes to both detectives Gregson and Lestrade for solving the case. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the Japanese name for this one. According to Google Translate, it is The Adventures of Laughing Dog, Silly Go Lucky. This game is based on what I gather was a somewhat Saturday Night Live-like Japanese variety show. It appears to have premiered in 1998 and ran to 2003 for 5 seasons. I have no idea what's happening in this game. The game is a collection of mini-games in game show format. Some are immediately playable, and some are more confusing and indecipherable if you don't speak Japanese. This gun shooting one was easy to pick up, but this one about picking the right answer or getting pumped with air was basically unplayable for me, and kinda sadistic in its theme and animation. Yep, overall, truly clueless as to what's happening in this game, but it's quirky as hell. Resident Evil prototype with bug fixes. This prototype is not the only Resident Evil game that can be played on the Game Boy, Resident Evil Gaiden being the other. But this is by far the odder of the two. The ROM is an unreleased prototype of this Capcom game that was in development and then cancelled. This is an actual attempt of a port of Resident Evil 1 from the original PlayStation to the Game Boy Color. Only Chris Redfield's story is available to play, no Jill Valentine. This is an incredibly ambitious idea, similar to the abandoned attempt to port Resident Evil 2 to the Game Boy Advance.
Resident Evil 2.
A bizarre incident occurred in the outskirts of an American suburb called a mutagenic toxin created by the international enterprise Umbrella Incorporated.
But that's another story. There's a bug fix ROM hack for this one to make the full game playable. Also, the patched version does not include a formal ending, because there was never one made for the original. But it's a playable version of Resident Evil 1 on the Game Boy Color. Is this a good game? No. The graphics are awful. The gameplay is not fantastic, and the idea is pretty ridiculous and quite ambitious. Is this a finished game? Even with the bug fixes, no. It's broken in many ways. Is it odd that this thing exists? Yes, it is. This has the making of something that could have been truly interesting and could have transcended what the system was thought to be capable of. But it was never meant to be. There are a lot of other offbeat games for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. It's fun to explore what's available and see what interesting bits of creativity are out there. I enjoy diving into games where people have poured out their creativity and come up with something different than what you'd expect. Quirky games are simply games where the personality of the creator really shines through in an interesting way. A lot of the indie games shown in this video are available through itch.io. It's great to support independent game devs. My next video will be about, well, it could be about anything. See you next time.